Oh, hello. Welcome you all again to our channel. So previously we have discussed about the introductory part of this lecture series, the chemical control and coordination, and we have covered the introduction and the type of hormones, endocrine glands, hormones, type of hormones, and in just previous lecture we have covered about the mechanism of act and mechanism of action of the hormone. So in this lecture, we are now concerned with the major endocrine glands, study of the major endocrine glands. So now we'll cover about the major endocrine glands, but before, have a brief on the hormones that we have seen that hormones are chemicals, intercellular messengers, and produced in trace amount which are non-nutritive. The type may be water soluble and the lipid soluble. And we also have seen that hormones are produced, let's say hormones are produced from cell A. The target will always be cell B because that's why we saying this hormone as the intercellular chemical messenger. So let's say if hormone is secreted from cell A and targeting to cell B, and we know that the cell membrane is of lipid bilayer membrane. So based on principle of like dissolve like, the hormone, lipid soluble hormone will cross the plasma membrane and binds with receptors present inside of plasma membrane, that is it may be in nucleus. But for water soluble hormone the receptor is on membrane, plasma membrane. So water soluble hormone will never cross the plasma membrane, rather than they bind with the receptors present on the plasma membrane, and after their binding they will form the receptor hormone complex. They will activate the second messenger, and after activating this second messenger, now the signal will send to the nucleus. They will activate the another factor for binding with the DNA, and according to that signal the cellular response will takes place. So this is the overall brief about the hormonal action. Okay, so now after completing all this introductory part of the hormone, we are shifting to the endocrine glands. So for major endocrine glands we have different types of endocrine glands. Let's say starting with the first, and we'll go with one by one to the another, like the let's now sorry. So for major endocrine glands, let's have a quick on the major endocrine glands. What kind of endocrine glands are there in our body? So the first will be our pituitary gland. Second will be our hypothalamus. Third will be our thyroid gland. Then we'll cover about thymus gland. After thymus gland, we'll cover with the pancreas, with the adrenal gland, and then we'll cover the gonads, and in last we'll cover some non organized glands. So this is overall the type of glands we have to cover here one by one. So pituitary gland is also called as master gland. Master gland. Why it is called as master gland? Because its secretion controls other glands. Okay. So pituitary gland is called as master gland. First, when the uh, hormone and the endocrine glands were studied in initial days after the birth of this endocrinology, the pituitary was first to discovered, and it was uh, then seen that the secretion of the pituitary gland is commanding the thyroid gland. Okay, so after the secretion of this pituitary gland, it was seen that the pituitary gland secretion is controlling the activity of this thyroid gland, controlling the activity of this thymus gland. Okay, controlling the activity of sorry thyroid gland, controlling the activity of the adrenal gland, controlling the activity of these gonads. So in more or less it is controlling the activities of other glands. So that time it was thought that the pituitary is commanding other glands, and so it was named as the master gland, because as their roles suggesting that they are mastering, they are guiding the other glands for their role and action. But as endocrinology study proceeded, it was seen that although pituitary is there, which is having the role in the command of the other organ, other gland, but it is hypothalamus, gland which is controlling the, it is hypothalamus which is controlling this pituitary. So although pituitary is controlling other glands, but it is hypothalamus which is controlling the pituitary. So if pituitary is master gland, so hypothalamus is supermaster gland. So since pituitary is already given the name as master gland, so hypothalamus is left over with glands, a gland of glands, right? So there's no specific name for the hypothalamus, but it's just a brief about the pituitary gland and hypothalamus, that how the study have proceeded in initial days of this endocrinology, and why it is called as the master gland, and why, how it is controlling the action, will uncover in our next slides. So now let's start with the pituitary gland. Let's start with the pituitary gland. Okay, pituitary gland, it is called as the master gland, as we have just discussed. Why it is master gland? Because it is controlling the activity of other glands, so it is called as the master gland. And what is the location of pituitary? Anatomically it is very a smaller structure. It's like pear shaped structure. Pituitary is pear-shaped structure and it is located in the sphenoid cavity of skull bone. So pituitary gland is basically located in sphenoid cavity of the skull bone. In the cavity is, sorry, I am making mistake, right? So it's not sphenoid cavity, it's sphenoid bone, right? So a small mistake that the sphenoid bone cavity, it is there. It is basically a sphenoid bone where there is cavity of a skull bone, and in that cavity this pituitary is found. Okay, and this cavity is given another name, and this is the sella turcica. Okay, it is sella turcica cavity. So in sella turcica cavity this pituitary gland is located. Okay, this pituitary gland is now located within the sella turcica, but will surprise to know that the pituitary gland, as we have just learned previously, that the pituitary gland is controlled by the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus is connected with the pituitary. Hypothalamus is connected with the pituitary, and it's like that. Let's have a drawing of that. So it is more or less this kind of a structure is there. This is the region of hypothalamus. This is the region of hypothalamus, and in hypothalamus some neurosecretory cells are there. In hypothalamus some neurosecretory cells are there, like this. Like this neurosecretory cells are there. Okay, and these are the neurosecretory cells. These are the neurosecretory cells. This is the hypothalamic region. This is hypothalamic region containing hypothalamus, and this hypothalamus contains the neurosecretory cells. These neurosecretory cells are the cells which secretes basically the hormones. Okay, this is the lobe of pituitary. This is the pituitary lobe. As you can see that this is the anterior lobe, and this is the posterior lobe of pituitary. This is the anterior lobe and this is the posterior lobe of pituitary. Okay, so this is the main division of this pituitary. Now this is, let's come to the point, pituitary gland. So pituitary gland is basically divided into two part. Pituitary gland is divided into mainly two part, and what are those two? The adenohypophysis and the neurohypophysis. The pituitary gland is anatomically divided into adenohypophysis and the neurohypophysis. Adenohypophysis and neurohypophysis. adenohypophysis. This adenohypophysis is having two further division as pars distalis, pars intermedia, and the neurohypophysis is not divided further, and it is seen as the pars nervosa, pars nervosa. This pars distalis is basically called as the anterior pituitary. This pars nervosa is called as the posterior pituitary. This pars intermedia is called as the middle lobe of pituitary. Okay, so you will be surprised to know that this interior pituitary has the hormone which is secreted by itself. So it synthesized and secretes their own hormone. Synthesized and secrete their hormone. Okay, but under influence of hypothalamus. But under influence of hypothalamus. But also you will be surprised to know that the posterior pituitary, although it is part of pituitary, this posterior pituitary doesn't synthesized any hormone. Rather than the hormone is directly synthesized by hypothalamus and poured directly into the posterior pituitary. So this is very surprising. Okay, so this is very surprising and also interesting. So the hormone of the anterior pituitary, which is secreted by itself, is the growth hormone FSH, LH, prolactin, ACTH, adenocorticotropic hormone, TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. The hormone of posterior pituitary is the ADH, or also called as vasopressin and oxytocin. Okay, so it is ADH, vasopressin, and it is oxytocin. Now after this anterior and posterior pituitary, the middle lobe of pituitary is also there, but it is almost merged with the anterior lobe. Almost merged with anterior lobe. It is almost merged with the anterior lobe, and after merging with the anterior lobe, the secretion of the middle lobe of pituitary The hormone is the MSH, the melanocyte stimulating hormone. So it secretes one hormone which is MSH, melanocyte stimulating hormone. So as we have seen that the anterior pituitary is synthesizing their hormone but under influence of hypothalamus, but the posterior pituitary is not synthesizing any hormone, rather than it is storing the hormone which is directly synthesized by hypothalamus and poured into the posterior lobe. So right over there you can see from the diagram that this is anterior lobe and this is the posterior lobe, where the neurosecretory cells of hypothalamus is directly connected with the posterior lobe, and the terminal end of these neurosecretory cells are the terminal part which opens into the posterior lobe and pour this secretion into the posterior lobe here in the hormone secreted from the hypothalamus. But in case of anterior pituitary here, as you can see, the neurosecretory cells are there, but it is not long enough to reach in the anterior lobe. So it now gets connected with this. This is the capillary. So this is the capillary, where it is connected with the capillary, opens in the capillary, and this capillary will now merge and form a vein, which is now next going inside the anterior pituitary, and also there it is splitted to form capillaries again. Okay, so this is the capillaries. And here you can see that the both of the capillaries here, as you can check here, that both of the capillaries here is connected by the vein. So it is known as the hypophyseal portal system. So portal system are those which are connected with the capillaries. So what happens here, that neurosecretory cells of this hypothalamus region secretes their product in the capillaries here, and after reaching this capillary site, this is the hormone collected from this capillary and reaching again to the capillaries inside the anterior lobe. And based on the hormone receiving in this inside of the anterior lobe, now the anterior lobe starts synthesizing their own hormone, like it can synthesize FSH, LH, GH, TSH, ACTH, or prolactin. So based on the information which is basically secreted by hypothalamus and reaching with the portal system. That's why we are saying that the anterior lobe of pituitary synthesized and secretes their hormone, but posterior lobe of pituitary basically stores the hypothalamic hormone directly secreted by the hypothalamus. So this is overall anatomy of this pituitary gland. Now come to the point, hormone one by one. The growth hormone GH. Growth hormone GH. As name suggests, growth hormone, that is, it is having a direct role in growth of an individual. Growth hormone is secreted by the anterior pituitary. So our goal is to study about the hormone of anterior pituitary. Hormones of anterior pituitary. Our main goal is to study about the hormone of anterior pituitary, and that's why we are discussing about the growth hormone, one of the first hormone of this anterior pituitary. So as the name suggests, growth hormone. So growth hormone has a direct role in growth of individual. Growth. So for growth may be of three types, like physical growth, mental growth, and sexual growth. Okay, so physical growth is basically maintained by bone and muscle. Mental growth, which is basically seen by brain, CNS, that is brain and spinal cord. Sexual growth, development of gonads. Okay, so for growth hormone, the physical growth is more frequently seen. That is, the physical growth of the individual is influenced by the growth hormone directly. But the mental growth is not that much. That is, there is no role in mental growth of the growth hormone. Little bit, very little or no in sexual growth. So here I write here very little. Okay, very little effect is seen on sexual growth by the growth hormone. So for growth hormone, the growth hormone has a role in the physical growth. Okay, so it is physical growth mainly. Physical growth mainly. Okay, not mental growth and not its sexual growth. Now for metabolism. So if it is involved in the growth, that is physical growth, so it will always influence the metabolism. So for lipid, what it is doing there, that during growth, cells are actively respiring and cells are actively expanding, and that's why there is the lipid will not stored there because of its active involvement in the cellular physiology and respiration. Cell needs the growth support, that is, cell needs biomass, cell needs energy. So it's like that whenever you are constructing a home or whenever you are looking for the home construction, at that time there is the thing in mind that rather than of a storage, invest everything in the construction site. So construction needs a lot of effort, energy and investment. So growth lipid is not stored, rather than lipid is breaking down. So breakdown of lipid is seen and it is called as lipolysis. Okay. So it is called as lipolysis for lipid. Why? Because we know that lipid is the stored storage product. It is stored in the adipocyte cells, or the cells temporarily stores lipid. So what it is doing there, that the storage of this lipid is inhibited. So other than lipid, we also have the another chemicals like the another chemicals we also have like the carbohydrate and the protein. So for carbohydrate is not uptaken. Okay, so carbohydrate is not directly uptaken. Why? Carbohydrate is not directly uptaken. Why? Because we know that these carbohydrates are the primary sugar which is revolving with the blood, and with this blood will take this carbohydrate to every cells, and this carbohydrate is used in maintenance of the osmotic balance and different roles. That's why there is already the lipid is, since lipid is actively involved in the lipolysis and the energy production and the biomass production, that's why carbohydrate is the not actively involved, so it is showing reduced consumption. Carbohydrate is not actively consumed, because if lipid is preference, then carbohydrate will be shut down or show less effect, and if it is carbohydrate is preference, so lipid will be stored. So both of these two compounds, lipid and carbohydrates, will work in opposite. Okay, so if one goes in the metabolism, other will be stored, and if other will be goes in metabolism, one will be stored. In that scenario it will work there. Another thing is protein. So if it is growth, we know that the physical growth is supported by this growth hormone. So if it is physical growth is supported by the growth hormone, so growth will always actively involve the formation of different structures, chemical structures, and the chemical reactions. And chemical reactions needs enzyme. So protein, basically the active involvement of protein is there during growth and support, growth and development. So protein formation is increased, protein synthesis is increased, and since protein synthesis is increased, so what will happen? The amino acid uptake is increased. Amino acid uptake is increased. So protein synthesis is increased. So this is overall about the growth hormone. That growth hormone promotes the physical activity for metabolism. Lipid is gone for the lipolysis. Carbohydrate shows its reduced consumption, and protein shows its increased synthesis. Okay. Now we also have other effect, like if growth hormone is having their role in growth of the body, normal growth of the body, so what will happen if it is overproduced? What will happen if it is overproduced? That is case of hypersecretion. And what it if it is underproduced, that is hyposecretion. It's underproduced. So there may be a case that the growth hormone is overproduced or underproduced. So if it is overproduced, that it will promotes physical health more and more. If it is overproduced, so it will promote more and more physical health. Like if it is overproduced in the child state, so during child stage, if the growth hormone is overproduced, so what will happen that the development of normal development of child is affected. The child will show rapid growth, the bone elongation, rapid bone elongation. So child stage, during child stage, if growth hormone is overproduced, the rapid development is seen, rapid growth of child is seen. The overall height of the child is increased, overall height is increased. Okay, and also this case is called as a medical term gigantism. A medical term is given as gigantism for this rapid growth. But in case if the growth hormone is overproduced in the adult stage, if growth hormone is produced overproduced in the adult stage, so what will happen? So in that case, it will cause a gorilla like appearance. Gorilla like appearance, that the overall normal body structure is changed gorilla like, and this case is called as the acromegaly. Acromegaly. Okay, another case is the hyposecretion. So let's say growth hormone is already secreted in an individual which is reaching to its adult stage. So if it is hyposecreted in adult stage, so there will not be difference, because an adult individual will not reverse his overall physical appearance. That's why in adult stage little bit less effect of this underproduction of growth hormone is seen. But in child stage, if growth hormone is underproduced, so it will cause problem like the normal growth is obstructed. So now the child which now has to reach a physical developmental stage, the physical development is obstructed and the child is now so dwarfism, correct, dwarf, and this is called as pituitary dwarfism. This is called as the pituitary dwarfism. Okay, so this is overall these three uh, consequences of underproduction and overproduction of growth hormone. That gigantism, if it is during child stage, growth hormone is overproduced. If in adult stage, growth hormone is overproduced, acromegaly, gorilla like appearance. And if it is underproduction of this growth hormone during the child stage. So the dwarfism is the case. So this is all about the growth hormone. Now let's come to the another hormone, which is the TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. So the name suggests that the thyroid stimulating hormone, so it will stimulate thyroid gland for their secretion of thyroid hormone, for their secretion of thyroid hormones. So the role of this TSH is to stimulate the thyroid gland for the secretion of this thyroid hormone. That is, it for basically it promote the synthesis and secretion both. Okay. The third is the ACTH, the adrenocorticotropic hormone. So for adrenocorticotropic hormone ACTH, now what it will do, it will stimulate the adrenal gland. Basically, remember, for right now it is glucocorticoids or cortisol. So stimulate the adrenal gland glucocorticoids or cortisol. The hormone, basically the glucocorticoids or cortisols, are the hormone which is synthesized from the zona fasciculata. Fasciculata. If you can remember, it's fine. Otherwise, just remember the adrenal gland is stimulated by the ACTH for the production of glucocorticoids or the cortisol. We'll learn it again when we will discuss about the adrenal gland. Okay, so right over there, just try to remember that ACTH stimulates the adrenal gland for the synthesis and secretion of this cortisol. Now the another important hormone is the prolactin. PRL, the short form is PRL, which is very frequently used. So prolactin is secreted in the either pregnant lady and the lactating lady. It stimulates the mammary gland development. Stimulate milk synthesis. So prolactin is very important hormone which is basically secreted by the anterior pituitary, and the role of this prolactin is in basically most frequently seen in the pregnant lady and lactating women, where the role is seen as to induce the development of the mammary gland, and also it stimulates the milk synthesis, right? So this is the role of prolactin. Now after this prolactin we have this FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone. So for FSH, if it is follicle stimulating hormone, so this hormone is secreted in both male and female, and it has different role in both, in male and female. Okay, so if it is like let's start with the female. So what it is doing there in female, like uh, if we try to remember or recall, or we'll cover it in later reproduction chapter, where we'll see that the female often go a cyclic change in ovary and menstrual cycle. Okay, so female shows two type of cycle: ovarian cycle and the menstrual cycle, where there is frequent change in cellular structures in seeds. It's seen. So for the ovarian development, the each of the cycle, uh, ovary release one egg after its development, and this development is supported by the follicles, ovarian follicles. So FSH supports ovarian follicle development of, or ovarian follicle, or we can say Graafian follicle. Okay, so this FSH supports the Graafian follicle development. That after development of this Graafian follicle, the Graafian follicle matures, and the egg is released. That is why we can say that supports oogenesis process. We can say that this supports the oogenesis process. Okay, so FSH will support the ovarian follicle development, the maturation of Graafian follicle, and if the Graafian follicle is matured, if this Graafian follicle is matured, will it now will release the hormone estrogen. That we know that the estrogen is synthesized and secreted by the Graafian follicular cells, and the follicular cells is the cells which is basically found in the ovary around the Graafian follicle. But in male, since there is no cyclic change as in case of female, it's same in male, but there it supports spermatogenesis. There it supports spermatogenesis, and it also influence the seminiferous tubules And these seminiferous tubules now can show the spermatogenesis process, where it can lead for the production of spermatozoa. And also these seminiferous tubules can now show for production of a spermatozoa and can support nutrition to this spermatozoa. So this is overall about the FSH. The next hormone is the LH, the luteinizing hormone. The next hormone is LH, luteinizing hormone, or it is also frequently used as ICSH, interstitial cell stimulating hormone. Interstitial cell stimulating hormone. So it is also secreted in both male and female, and it has different role in both male and female that will cover. Luteinizing hormone or LH is more frequently used for this female, and ICSH is the term more frequently used for male. So what it does in female, so directly in female it can cause ovulation from matured Graafian follicle. Okay, and after the release of this ovum promotes corpus luteum development and progesterone synthesis. One point is this, but in male, what it is doing there, that in male it is found in interstitial cell outside of the seminiferous tubule. Okay, so the target is basically I mean to say the target interstitial cells outside of the seminiferous tubule, and it causes a release of this testosterone hormone. And this testosterone hormone, what it is doing there, so this testosterone hormone is cause of puberty stage change, and also it supports the spermatogenesis process. So till now we have covered all about the hormones of the anterior pituitary, one by one: growth hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone TSH, ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. Then we have covered the prolactin, and further we have covered the FSH and LH. the follicle stimulating hormone and the LH luteinizing hormone. So for this FSH and LH, since these two hormones directly targets the FSH and LH directly targets the gonads, and that these two hormones are called as the gonadotropins. So these two hormones are called as the gonadotropins. Now come to the next point, the posterior pituitary hormone. The posterior pituitary hormone. So we know that the posterior pituitary hormone basically is of two types, the oxytocin and the vasopressin or ADH. So let's take about one, the oxytocin. So what is oxytocin basically? So for oxytocin, it is the hormone which is synthesized by hypothalamus, but it is stored in the posterior pituitary hormone. That is why we are saying it as the hormone of posterior pituitary hormones. Posterior pituitary, but the role of oxytocin is directly the contraction. The role, it is contraction. It is the hormone which is causing the contraction, and where in smooth muscle. In a smooth muscles, it is causing the contraction. So for oxytocin, the oxytocin shows their broad role in either the pregnant lady during parturition. So in that pregnant lady during parturition, the oxytocin level is very high. Oxytocin is very high, very high, and the high level of oxytocin now reach to the myometrium of the uterus, where it causes the contraction. So this oxytocin in pregnant ladies basically causes contraction in the myometrium and the parturition occurs. And also this oxytocin has a role in the lactating women, where the oxytocin is causing the contraction in a smooth muscle, contraction in a smooth muscle, the myoepithelium. Where this smooth muscle contraction can cause the release of milk from the alveoli, to lumen, and lumen to lacetiferous duct, and then outside. So basically the main point is that the oxytocin can cause the contraction in uterus, it is myometrium, and in the mammary gland it is the myoepithelium, where the contraction can cause the release of milk. So this is about the oxytocin. There is not too much information, not very complex, but you have to remember that what is the exact role. Now come to the point ADH. ADH, it is called anti diuretic hormone, or also called as vasopressin. It is also called as the antidiuretic hormone or vasopressin. So what is ADH or the vasopressin? So let's say that when there is uh, less body fluid or body volume, fluid volume. So in case body fluid decreases or the pressure also decreases, so kidney detects that the pressure, the body fluid, body volume is decreased, the pressure is decreased. So in that case, to maintain this, the antidiuretic hormone from the posterior pituitary is secreted. Then influence of the low body volume or low body fluid or the pressure, reduced pressure. So first thing is that this ADH from the posterior pituitary, what it is doing there, that this is causing the constriction in blood vessels. So this constriction in blood vessels will narrow down the blood flow area and increases the blood pressure. Increases the blood pressure. So this vasopressin, the vasopressin, that's why the vasopressin is called as the vasopressin, because it is causing basically the constriction in blood vessels. So in this way the pressure is maintained, but body fluid volume is still there. Body fluid volume is still there. Okay. So body fluid volume is still there. So to maintain this body fluid volume, this vasopressin also influence DCT and collecting duct. DCT in collecting duct to reabsorb butter. So this vasopressin, one thing is that it is causing the constriction, and this constriction leads for the increased blood pressure, but the body volume, fluid volume is remains there as such. So to increase the fluid volume, this vasopressin or ADH is now causing the reabsorption of water in DCT, digital collecting duct, and the collecting duct. Okay. And also the increase sodium plus absorption. So along with water, the sodium plus absorption is there, and in that case, if sodium plus is absorbed, the K plus is released out to maintain the osmolarity of the body volume. Okay. So this is about the ADH antidiuretic hormone. That is, it doesn't have a role, rather than we can say that it directly influence the body fluid volume and pressure, in the sense that it is causing the contraction of the blood vessels, where it is increasing the blood pressure, and also it is involved in the more and more reabsorption of water and sodium, where its retention in this DCT and collecting duct promotes the body fluid or enhance the body fluid volume. Let's say if the case of the hyposecretion. So if it is a hyposecretion of ADH, okay. So if the hyposecretion of ADH is there, that is less amount of ADH in blood. So first thing is that it will not cause the blood pressure to be normal. That is, there is reduced blood pressure. So it will cause reduced blood pressure. Since it is not reabsorbing the water and sodium from the distal part and collecting duct, so body fluid volume is decreased, pressure is decreased, okay. The fluid volume and pressure is decreased, increased frequency of urination. It is called as polyuria. It is called as diuresis, polyuria, okay. So it is called as diuresis. The increased urine formation is there, and it is called as diuresis. To compensate this overall this decreased body fluid volume and body pressure, blood pressure, the person tried to drink more. That's why it is called as a drinker disease, drinker situation. Drink more, thirst condition is increased. Drink more, more drink, more urine, more drink, more urine, and that's why it is called as the diabetes insipidus. The more and more body fluid and pressure is reduced, the urine frequency is increased. To compensate that, drink more, thirst, increased thirst, and this situation is called as diabetes insipidus. So this is all about the pituitary hormone. We have covered so far about the anatomy of the pituitary gland, and then we have covered the different hormone of the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. Hope you have enjoyed this lecture. Now our goal is to go ahead with the hypothalamus and the thyroid gland. Thyroid gland is one of the major gland of our body, so we'll cover it in next lecture. Till thank you to be patient with us. Now our next goal is to learn about the hypothalamus and the pituitary. Hypothalamus and thyroid. Thank you.